Alright guys, I am very excited to start this section actually because it is the section where we finally start building the website. We're finally starting to convert the PSD to a responsive HTML website. So let's get started. Alright guys, we're back here. Open up the Photoshop file, the PSD to HTML beginner to advanced. And let's start studying, observing, and preparing this Photoshop design so it can be ready to convert it into a responsive website. So first thing that we need to do, just wait up for the Photoshop to load. Right there, select the move tool, zoom in quite a little bit here. I'm using Control Alt and mouse scroll on Windows to zoom in and out like this. And I'm pressing on space to get this hand icon, and I can move it around with a click. So this is how we are going to navigate through the PSD document from now on. I'm doing this space and left click and dragging and dropping and zooming in right like that. So the first thing that we need to determine is the width of the document. So imagine that this is the whole website that you're seeing here, and this is the content. So we have this image, this text, this button, oops, Control Z to undo, this button, and then these features. And as we can see, everything in this design is put into a imaginary container which holds the content, as we can see the line here. Now to prepare this and to show this more clear, let's open up the rulers here. Just press on View, Rulers, or the shortcut on Windows would be Control+R. I'm just going to press that, and we have these rulers on the top and left hand side on our screen. And now if I drag here, click and drag from this side, we can see a ruler is popping out on the screen, and this is for visual purposes only. It does not affect the PSD file in any way. Now, why are these rulers necessary? Because they help us determine the width of the content of this website. So let's say that I'm placing this ruler here right there, right about there. And as we can see, if we scroll down, all the content in this PSD is inside of this ruler here. And that's actually pretty good. The designer has created this PSD file pretty well. So if we get another ruler here and put it on the other side of the container, pretty much there, and if we scroll down, we can see again that the content is basically centered inside this container, and other segments of the website, such as this background here, or this background lady here, or this background picture here, they are all going outside of this content holder or this content container, and that is fine. The first step is done here. Now we need to measure this width of the content container, and we do that by, there's actually plenty of ways to do this because Photoshop is a really neat tool, but one of the ways I'm using is I'm selecting this rectangular marquee tool, and I'm just going to zoom in here for a better view. I'm just going to be starting to determine the size from this view here. As you can see, as I'm increasing this marquee selection, we can see that the width of the selection is increasing or decreasing respectively. So if I join these two rulers here, we can see that the width of this selection is 1108 pixels. Now that is the size of the content container of this document. So we're just gonna use that width for our content container. We're just going to use 1100. We're gonna get rid of those 8 pixels which probably were here. I was not doing any certain work with the rulers. It was all by hand, by eye, so it doesn't really matter. Those 8 pixels, we're gonna take them away, so we have a clean sheet of 1100 pixels. Now where we need to write those numbers, so go back and open up your brackets. Open up the folder that we have just created here, the starting project environment. Let's create a container here. So I'm just going to use the Emmet plugin, and inside of this container, let's create a heading 1. This is a test message, but before we get started doing this, let's actually increase the size of these brackets canvas here, because you might be having problems looking clearly at the code. So I'm just going to press here Control and plus 2 times so we get zoomed in a bit here so you can see better what I'm coding. So we just created a container with a heading 1 inside. As you remember, this content holder was 1100 pixels here. So if we go to CSS and under these reset.css commands, I'm just going to write general rules. And I'm just going to go like that, and I'm just going to select this container here, and let's see what happens if we save on both documents. We're going to preview this live. That's one of the benefits of using brackets. And if we preview it live, you can see this blue line, this blue rectangle, that is the actual container, and that is our heading 1 inside of that container. Now what we need to do in order to resize the size of the container is simply write maximum width of this container would be equal to the content holder of the website. So that is 1100 pixels. And we're going to write width 100% so the design is fluid. We're not sure if this would be necessary, but so far we're just gonna leave it as this. And now if we go to our website, we can see that the size of the container has shrunk down, but it is not satisfactory because it's centered on the left here. And if we go back to the brackets and if we do margin on the left of auto and margin on the right also auto, can you guess what would happen? The container would be centered perfectly within our browser because the margin on the left and on the right is set to auto. Now a shortcut for this would be margin 0 auto. This is margin on the top and bottom would be 0, and margin on the left and right would be auto. So if we remove those and if we save this, we will get the exact same thing here. So that is our container width. And now what you can guess is that this content that the website offers would be placed in this blue container here. As you can see, that is the width of 1100 pixels, and everything will go in this container, and everything that's outside of the container, such as these background images or this color or this footer color or this copyright gray color, everything will go outside of this container, which is again 1100 pixels. Thank you for watching, and in the next lecture we are actually deciding on what images to use and what images to not use. See you there. Alright guys, welcome back to a brand new lecture. This one will be about deciding on which images to use during the conversion, where to use pure CSS, and just general lookup of the file PSD design right before we start slicing up the design. So right now we are deciding what to slice, what to crop, and what to leave to do with CSS. Open up your project here, your Photoshop file to be more precise. Get rid of the rulers by just dragging them away from the canvas. So basically, let's see here. For example, this iPhone, there is absolutely no way that we can create these with CSS. So by default, we need to get this image away from the Photoshop file, crop it off, and then save it as an IMG file, so then later we can use it in our CSS to insert it in our website. So we need the iPhone first. Alright, next up is the logo here, which is basically a font, as we can see here, right there. If we turn it off and on, we can see it disappears right away. Now it's up to you to decide if you want to use this logo, if you want to save this logo as a image, or if you want to write it as text in your HTML, because if I press on the shortcut T on the keyboard, which brings me to the horizontal type tool, and if I click on this logo here, we can see that this prompt that it says the following fonts are missing, and the font is Olivier. Now what we could do is go on Google, find the font Olivier, install the font, and then we're gonna have, once we have the font on our machine, we will be able to achieve this same effect in HTML5 and CSS3. But if you ask me, that's pretty much time consuming. So what we can do instead is save this logo as an image. So we're gonna do that in the next lesson. Right now we're deciding which images to use and which CSS rules to use. So next up is this button here. If we think logically, it's basically this button here can be created with CSS. This grayish dark gray color is easily created with CSS, and this oval edge here. But what we can't do with CSS is this mobile icon here. So we're going to need to extract this mobile icon from the PSD design and then insert it in our file structure. Continuing down, we have the app features section, and right here everything is text. Okay, so these titles and these paragraphs and all of this is pretty much text, but these are the three images which are pretty self-explanatory, which means that we are going to be converting these images to a web image, and then we're going to save that for the web, and then we're going to reference them in the HTML file, because there's no other way to display these graphics other than saving them as an image. Going down, we have the exact same thing here. The text, the paragraph, and the heading can be purely done with CSS, so we're leaving that off, as well as this button here. So it can be easily done with CSS, but for example, this background here with the lady with the big nose cannot be created with CSS. So that's why we are going to be cropping this lady off from this background, and maybe even consider taking the background with her as well. So this whole image here. Alright, going down, we have the footer section. Again, this logo is the same thing. We're going to decide a bit later if we want to use this font just for this logo here, and on the top we'll see if it's worth it. If it's not, we're just going to grab this logo as an image and we're basically done. I'm going to explain how to do this in the next lecture, where we're going to be slicing up the design. Continuing on, we have these three blocks. I have decided to grab them off the PSD, save them as an image, and insert them in the HTML. And last, we have these three logos here that we also need to grab from this design. And they're basically the Facebook, the Dribble, and the Twitter icons here. Okay. So basically there goes our image structure. We decided to use these images, these rectangles, the logo, the background here, these three graphics, the iPhone, the logo again, this little small iPhone icon, and that's pretty much it, guys. In the next lecture, we will be starting off to slice the design, which is pretty an important lecture because we're gonna learn how to edit out, crop out, and slice an image and then insert into our file structure. So join me in the next one. Alright guys, welcome back to a brand new lecture. In this one we will be slicing up the PSD design to take away all the images we need in order to continuing building the website, so stay tuned. Alright guys, we're back here with this lecture, and without further ado, let's start off converting these images. So I'm just going to use the move tool here, and then I'm going to click on the logo here. And as soon as I click on the logo, we can see that the layer gets selected right here. So this is the logo layer. that we're currently on right now, and if I press on Control and left click on this mini icon here, we can see that the logo gets selected. Alright, so we're sure that we are on the exact layer that we need to be on. So I'm just going to press on Control plus D to deactivate the selection here, and follow this carefully. As soon as I'm on the layer that I want to convert as an image, what I first need to do is right click and then convert to smart object. Sometimes images will not be a smart objects, and that's why you need to convert them to a smart object before moving on. And basically what a smart object is, it is a website friendly images. It's create website friendly graphics. You can resize, rename, you can do anything on it without losing quality. It is recommended that for website creation and for website use, you use smart objects, converting them in Photoshop and then saving them for the web. So that's a brief introduction to what a smart objects are. Alright, so right now this is already a smart object, and if I go while this layer is selected, if I press on Control plus A, which will basically select everything that this layer has to offer, that anything that is inside of this layer will get selected. And if I do after this Control plus C to copy everything that's on this layer, which is basically this text here, and then if I press on Control N to create a new document, we can see that the width and the height of the document are the exact width and height of this logo here, or basically this text here. And as soon as we get this information, we know that everything is correct. And when we press on OK, we're going to get prompted and we will be given a new document with the exact width and height of the layer that we've just copied. So now if I press on Control V to paste it, our whole layer we just copied from the original Photoshop file gets pasted inside. Now you can't really see it because there's a background image, but if we turn off the background image, we can see that there's a logo which is transparent, and that's exactly what we want here. So right now everything left to do is to save this image for the web, and the shortcut for that on Windows is Control plus Alt plus Shift plus S. Press these at the same time and make sure that every time you save an image which has a transparent background, you must save it as a PNG 24. Do not ever forget this. So we're granted with this logo here which has a transparent background, and that's exactly what we want. And if we do click on save and navigate to our folder, our images file, we can say that we're basically done if we just press on type logo.png, and if we save it and then check the images folder right here, we can see that the logo is there and it's basically with transparent background ready to be deployed on the web. Alright guys, I hope that was informational, and I'm just gonna close this away. So our logo is basically done here. Now notice that the whole website, or more correct, the whole layer is selected here. Right now we are still on the mobile app layer. What we want to do next is deselect everything with Control and D, and then press on the move tool again, and the next image that we want to convert is the iPhone image here. And as you can see, if we turn this off and on, the iPhone is still there. Let's just try to convert this in a smart object, and again it is already a smart object. For example, this here is not a smart object, and if we do convert, we can see that we're getting a given smart object for the same layer. I'm just gonna undo this, and we're back to our iPhone here, and we're gonna do the same thing right now. We're on the layer that we want to convert, and we press on Control A to select everything. Then we press on Control C to copy, Control N to create a new document, and again we see this width and height are the exact width and height of our layer content here, which is the iPhone. And if I press on OK, we're gonna get a new window with the exact width and size, and all we have to do now is just copy the content, which is the iPhone itself, and we're gonna do that by pressing on Control V, and there is the iPhone. Just before you save the image, do not forget to turn off the background, because we don't need a background in our website. All right, so now that we have this, just do save for web. I'm going to repeat the shortcut once again, which is Control plus Shift plus Alt plus S, and we see that save for web window is active here. PNG is already set because we did that the last time, and all we have to do is save the image, name it iPhone, and press on save, and it should be right off to your directory of images. And if we see the extension here, it is a PNG image such as the logo here. I'm going to convert one more image, and then I'm going to let you convert all of the remaining images by yourself. All right, so for example, because this is a problematic one, let's do that right now. This background here. All right, now select your move tool and then click on this lady here. All right, first just select the marquee tool, deselect everything, we forgot that, and then select the move tool and click on this lady here, which is this layer named 78H by the designer. So if you click on this, on and off, we can see that the lady is selected. But let's say that I also want to select this background, this light gray background as well. So I know that the grayish background, if I select on that, we're selecting the rectangle one, which is right beneath the lady picture here. So these are the two images that we want to combine together, and in order for them to be combined together, we need to select both of them and then transfer them into a smart object. All right, so now we're left with only one layer here, and that's exactly what we want. So if I turn this on and off, we can see that the lady and the grayish background are turned off and on together at the same time. So now what's left to do is, I'm going to repeat the step again. Make sure that the layer is selected, press on Control A, Control C, Control N, and we're getting the exact width and height of this image. Press on OK, paste it, turn off the background, save it for web, Control Alt Shift S, press on save. Just name this picture whatever you want. I'm just going to name it nose-bg. Save that, and that's basically it. If we go to our images folder, we can see the nose image right there. And that's basically it, guys. That's how you transform, convert, and slice off images from any Photoshop file. I hope that this lecture was useful to you, and what's left for you to do now is do the exact thing for this iPhone small icon here, which is right there. If I'm trying to select it, it's right there, shape 1. Do not forget to transform this into a smart object, so that's left to convert. These 3 images are also left to convert. That's I'm letting you to do it by yourself. And then also these 3 logos and these 3 rectangles. So take your time, do not hurry, learn how to do this, master this way of slicing the PSD off, and I'll see you in the next lesson. See you there. Alright guys, we are back once again with a new lecture in which we are going to be installing the necessary fonts that this Photoshop design uses in a way that we can recreate them and use them in our website design, so stay tuned. Alright guys, we are back here, and let's see. Firstly, we need to distinguish and we need to observe which fonts is this PSD document is using. Now, during your career, you might find PSD designs that use a lot of fonts, and that usually is not the best idea to have that many fonts installed. So I'm guessing that this PSD design, because it looks really clear and it looks flawless, I'm guessing that it has no more than 2 fonts. So the way you identify fonts is pretty easy. You just press on the shortcut T, or you are clicking this horizontal type tool, and for example, I want to see which font does this heading use. So all I have to press is left click on the sentence, and right now I'm seeing that it says the following fonts are missing for that title, and the font that currently is using is Montserrat Bold. So font Montserrat, alright? And if you already, by any chance, you have this font Montserrat installed on your machine, you will not be prompted for this window, but instead it will be shown immediately right here. So for now, we know that this website uses the font Montserrat. Let's test something else. Let's test this paragraph here, and if we click on that, we can see that the following fonts are missing from that sentence, and the fonts are Helvetica New Thin. Alright, so far we have 2 fonts, and that's basically it. If we click here, we can see that Helvetica Light is appearing, which is pretty much a very similar font. Right here we have this Helvetica New again, and if we continue on the site, probably here is Montserrat. That is correct. Here would be Montserrat Bold again. Let's see where here. Oops. Here would be the Montserrat Regular. So right now we need to implement bold and regular, and we're gonna use the Helvetica New, only 1 font, so the website can be consistent and pleasing on the eye. So firstly, let's install the first and the main font of this website, which is the Montserrat. And always the first thing you should do when installing fonts is check if the font is available on Google. Check if the font is a Google font. How can we do that? Go on your browser, press on Google, and write Montserrat font. Alright? And let's hope that this is a Google font, and as we can see here, there is the Montserrat Google Fonts link. Click this. Google makes it very easy to install fonts, and I do recommend to use Google whenever possible. So Google Fonts. Alright. So we have Montserrat here, and if we press on select this font here, right here we're seeing 1 family selected. Okay, click on that, and you're going to be given this kind of window which says that the font of our selection is Montserrat. The load time is fast, so this font is pretty nice. And if we want to press on customize here, we can select also the bold version of the font. So not only Montserrat Regular, but also bold. Alright, so check on bold as well. And now when we embed this font, all we need to do is copy the link here, which is fonts.googleapis.com/css, and the font. Copy that, and all we need to do is paste the font in our index.html. So let's just do a comment and write Google Fonts, and right after that just paste the link. And then in the CSS we also need to call this font here, and that's pretty much how we do it. Font family Montserrat sans serif. So let's try and see if it works here. I'm just going to write that a whole body should use this font, for example. So body, font family Montserrat sans serif. And if we do live preview our website, there is already some heading here. Let's increase the size of the heading as well. Font size 25 pixels, for example. Let's do live preview on this and see what happens. Alright, perfect. Now we see that this font has changed here. And in order to see if the font is showing up as it should, is to right click on this test message here, go to compute it, and scroll to the very bottom where we see that the render font is indeed Montserrat. Perfect. Now that we see that that's working, let's implement the other font, which is Helvetica New. And this time we're gonna use a different way of creating and inserting fonts. So because Helvetica New is not a Google font, we are immediately facing a problem which is harder to implement a particular font. But do not worry, we're gonna do that right now. If you go and check your project files, I've included this font especially for you. I'm just going to drag and drop. This font should be available for you into the project files in the CSS folder. So all I'm going to do is copy this font here and paste it in our CSS folder along with the style. So there goes our font. We can also create a font folder here, but so far just leave it as is. Once you've pasted the CSS into the CSS folder, this font, go to the CSS and let's try to include the font right now. The way we include the font is pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy. Just do at font face, open curly brackets, and do font family, the same name that is on this file here. So font family would be Helvetica New Thin. Close that. Underneath write source, which basically says that the source of this font is local because we have this font locally. Right now we are in the CSS, so we're basically selecting the Helvetica New Thin. We just need to write the extension of the font, which is OTF. I'm pretty sure that the font is OTF. Open type font file, so OTF. Then do comma and then do URL. Again, open up brackets and do the very same thing again. Copy this and paste it. And do just space format, open up brackets and do the extension, which is open type, and close this. And now we should be ready to go. Let's try font family Helvetica New Thin on the body and let's see if everything works fine. Refresh and we see that the font has changed and it looks pretty much like everything is working fine, that this is the Helvetica New Thin font. Let's just make sure that that is the case here. Compute it, scroll down, and we see that the rendered fonts are Helvetica New Thin. Thank you for watching, guys. And in the next lesson, we are going to be studying and creating helper classes, which is a pretty advanced option in CSS. It is pretty easy to do. By advanced, I mean that advanced users are using it because helper classes save a lot of time when creating websites. So more on help classes in the next lesson. So see you there. Alright guys, welcome back to a new lecture. This one will be about creating helper classes, explaining what helper classes are and why are they useful. So stay tuned. Alright guys, let's start off here without further ado with opening up our brackets code editor. So there goes our website here. Let's talk about helper classes. So basically our helper classes are normal CSS classes used to save time during your coding experience. Now let me explain what I mean by this. So go into your CSS and this here is the reset CSS. So let's keep this well organized and type reset CSS begin and here reset CSS end, and in between let's create these helper classes. So helper classes begin, helper classes end. Okay, so let's create the first helper class here, and that would be, you can call this anything, remember, so let's call this align left. Okay, and inside this class we're gonna write float left, and again one more align right, and this will float to the right. Now what are these? Right now they are not present, these CSS classes are not present anywhere. in our HTML. But why are they useful for? So for example, that we're building this website and there's a lot of code here. So let's say that, for example, we're having multiple instances here of headings, okay? And let's say that I want some of these to float on the left, I want some of these to float on the right. So instead of creating classes for each one of those headings here, we just need to use this class which we've just created if we want a heading to float on the left or float on the right. So all we need to do is heading 1 class align left, and it will automatically align to left. If you do live preview to see if it works, align right, we can see that the heading is aligned to the right. And you can create as many helper classes as you want. For example, we can create a class called margin bottom 10, okay? And we're just going to do margin bottom of 10 pixels, and that is pretty self-explanatory. So every time we're coding here in the HTML, instead of switching out and reaching out to the style.css to create a class and then to call the class and then add a margin on the bottom, all we need to do is just write here h3 class margin bottom 10, and we know that this heading by default will have a margin bottom of 10 pixels because that's what this class do in CSS. So if we see in our document here, we can see that this margin bottom here is present at the 3rd heading. So I'm just going to do a couple of those in case we're using them during our later lectures here. So I'm just going to do margin bottom 20, 30, 40, 20, 30, 40, and that's basically all we need to do for these margins and floats. Now, if I want to create more helper classes, let's say that I want to create all the strong elements in the HTML and all the B elements in the HTML, which is bold and strong, should have a font weight of 700. So for example, if I want this to be in a strong tag, I'm just going to write here strong and close it right here. So this whole message is in a strong tag, and if I go to the website here, we can see that the last heading is actually bolder if you compare it to these other ones. So instead of me creating a class for this heading 5 here, for example, heading 5 class of strong, and then going to the CSS and creating a different class each time, all I have to do is place this in a strong tag and it will work as good. And the same goes with EM and I, which is emphasis and italic. So I can do font style italic, and pretty much every time I wrap something in the tag EM, it will be italic by default. Okay, now let's create some more of these helper classes, which I think they're pretty important. Even if we don't use them in our file, they're still important. Why? Let me tell you. So let's select the P, all the P classes, all the ULLI classes, and all the ordered list LI classes. And let's create a default font size of 16 pixels. Line height, I'm going to explain what this is in a second here, of 23 pixels, and margin to the bottom of 20 pixels. This means that all P's that will be in our index document will have a default size of 16 pixels. Why is this important? Because during your development career, you will not be the only one who will edit this document. So if you pass on this document to other web developer and he creates a P tag himself, so he creates a paragraph by himself, but he does not add any class to it. If you don't have this default font size for all of the P tags, his font size will be equal to 0 and he will not be able to see anything. So these default sizing are pretty important here. We don't have a paragraphs yet in our file here, but that's fine. Let's create some so we can showcase this better. So I'm going to create 5 P classes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, so as we can see here, these P classes have a default styling, which is the margin bottom, and then they have this font size, the default font size of 16. If we change that, we can see that it's changed accordingly. And this line height, always make sure to set the line height a couple more pixels than the original font size, so they're not clustered. For example, if we remove margin, we can see that these font sizes are pretty much clustered here, these paragraphs. So instead, just set them line height of a couple of more pixels than the actual font size. Alright, so that should be good here. And that's pretty much our explanation on helper classes, guys. I hope that you understood the concept of helper classes, and I hope as well that we are going to be using some of these during our lectures. Feel free to create your own helper classes if you think that some of those will be necessary. If you're writing some code over and over again, might as well consider creating a helper class to save and speed up your time. So I'll see you in the next one.